challenges. And the people of Bukuru, since around 12 years ago, started coming to our office to seek our support in addressing actually one of the another challenge they faced, which is eviction, due to the place where this land sit on. It's a prime land, and the people who sit there don't have titles. So you have people who have titles and don't sit there. So due to these challenges of land, challenges of flooding, as you can see, challenges of basic services, we decided to conduct a research to understand them better. And through that research, we are able to go and collect data, enumeration data, household profiles, and also conduct GPS coordinates of all the services, all the water taps in the area, all the electricity poles in the area, if there are any, all the toilets in the area, just 100% enumeration of the area to just understand it better. And through that research, which we conducted, we were able to establish now a number of issues that affected the area. One of them being the issue of land, where the land owners are people who have titles but don't, another one that have constructed the area. We have structure owners who have come and have constructed. Then we have majority of people living there being tenants, about 94% being tenants. We found out that the people of Mukuru suffer what you call a poverty penalty, where they pay more for services, yet the services they receive are of low quality and quantity compared to the formal estates. For instance, we found out they pay about 200% more for 1 cubic meter of water compared to the formal estates. Yet the water they receive, you can see on that picture on the left, where you have water pipes. So it's you can see there's a toilet that is effluenting on top of the water pipes that people buy water from. So that kind of image is consistent. If you go to Mukuru, you find such kind of pipes. So this water is not yet, you can't just drink it. You have to boil it. So it's though you buy it expensive, you still also have to incur extra cost before you use it. So with that, after the research, we asked ourselves, what do we do? So we approached the county government of Nairobi, and we asked them, we have done this research in Mukuru. These are the results. We need to do something on this area. So the county asked us, what do you want us to do? And then we proposed to them with that we can declare the area as a special planning area. So the county governments in Kenya are given powers by our constitution and the Kenya Planning Act, Physical Planning Act, where they can declare an area as a special planning area if such an area experiences unique development challenges and also opportunities. So Mukuru had unique development challenges, but also had opportunities that can make the area better. So after that, the county, after a long, about 3 years of pushing, because they were not buying into the idea, after 3 years of pushing, they agreed to declare Mukuru as a special planning area in 2017. Then after the declaration, what happened is that they said we organize thematic areas that mirror the county departments. As you can see on your screen, those are the areas that we formed. We formed thematic areas that looked at issues on environment, issues of water, issues of land, health, and all that. And then our approaches was to ensure that, because we didn't have the knowledge in all these areas. So we supported the county government to recruit organizations that with expertise in these different thematic areas to join and form consortia and then can support the county and the community to plan. So that was one of our approach, to form a multidisciplinary team, and drawn from about 41 local and international organizations, from civil society, academia, and private sector. Then from there, then we also then ensure that the plans that will be developed must be integrated, because you find one sector relies on another sector. So you have to ensure that we develop the plans in an integrated manner. And then the next question was, how do you ensure that the plans that will be developed by this process are participatory enough and the community participated in them? So maybe I mentioned to say this. Once an area is declared as a special planning area, the county government is supposed to come up with redevelopment plans after 2 years. So the objective of declaring the Mukuru special plan was to develop the redevelopment plans for that area, which should be done within a period of 2 years. So for the community participation, our question is, how do you ensure 100,000 people participate in the process? It's a huge ask. So it's by law in Kenya, there's a requirement to ensure people participate in all projects that affect them. But the law does not give a methodology on how to do it. So people take advantage of that and do shallow participatory processes. So for us, we thought of ensuring that we deepen our processes and we deepen our participation within the community. So we started our participation at the household level. So Mukuru has in total about 30 villages. So those 30 villages, we segmented in them in 13 segments of 18,000 households each. So under each segment, we had 8,000 households that had around 80, that is about 80 households clusters. So we had clustering of 80 households in each clustering of in that segment. So people in each of those sub-clusters of 100 households would meet, discuss their issues. If there's an issue on water, they meet at that level of 100 households, discuss their issues, then select someone who represents them at the segment level, where each consortium comes to now consult with the community. And through that process, we're able to have around 117 direct community consultation meetings and over 250 participatory indirect meetings where the community are preparing. Out of this process, after the draft plans were prepared in 2020, the government adopted those plans even before they were finished, and started implementing those plans by doing roads, doing hospitals, doing sewers, doing drains, to ensure that they transform the area and improve the livelihoods of the people of Mukuru. So far, government has done about 25 kilometers of road. They have done level 3 hospitals. They have dug boreholes that are able to supply free water. They are connecting people to the sewer, and a lot more is yet to be done, but something is happening. But this process has had its challenges and also learning. The first thing is that there's the importance of working together in a multidisciplinary nature, where you bring different expertise to the table to solve the challenges. The second thing is the patience to work with the community and to ensure that it's better to take time to listen to the community than rush. So the patience to work with the community. The third thing is that there's the importance of the integrated planning and ensuring that you just don't go to an area and just look at one sector. So, because one sector, when you look at one sector, then you leave questions that need to be addressed by the next center. So the integrated planning has been one of the learnings, but challenges has been there also. When you come with such a project in a community, the first thing is resistance, because you have people who want the status quo to remain. We have people who supply water. We have people who work on the toilets and all that. So those people will start opposing your area. Then also, due to the evictions that were happening in this area, people thought this was also another way of evicting them. So we had to really create a lot of awareness, deal with the rumors that were spreading by these people. And then also with the challenges also we had is also of convening the government to join the process. But also after the government should join the process, we also had a period where we had a high turnover with government officials, where they were getting laid off after a few days. So it also took a toll on us. And also we had also another challenge of resources. And that was a big challenge throughout. We didn't have the money as we had planning, so we just using the minimum we can get. So that was also a big challenge for us. But yeah, at least now we are grateful. At least something is happening, and hopefully the plans will continue being implemented until everything is finished. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick, for the very informative presentation. Not only talking about the methodology and approach, but also setting the context in what is a very complex place of Mukuru. Just a few comments that I really want to highlight and bring attention to is this multidisciplinary approach, not necessarily coming in with the prescriptive idea of what needs to be done, but bringing in the many different experts, whether it's the roads or the water people or the sanitation. And this obviously does take time, right? It's not a matter of sort of presenting to the community, you have one choice and either take it or leave it, but really sort of giving the time for things to sort of stew and to settle in while the community decides what it is that they want. One thing I'd really like to note as very noteworthy from AMT is the community participation process, that there actually is a structure to it, right? That it's not just a simple matter of walking into a community and asking what people want, but also creating a structure or as well as a hierarchy of decision making, if you will, right? So that from the household moving to household representatives and then going to a clustering approach, I think is very effective in not only organizing the opinions that are coming through, but creating a sense of structure amongst the community as a whole. So thank you again. I'm going to move on to Carmen Sing from Mozambique to share her experience working with the water and sanitation for the Urban Poor program. Carmen, over to you.
Hello. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I won't be sharing my a little bit. If I use the camera, then it might go down. But okay, I'm going to share just a little bit about that we have that WhatsApp has in climate change. My name is Carmen, as you know, and I'm working as project manager in Beira, Mozambique, for water and sanitation for the urban poor. Water and sanitation for the urban poor works already for several years in different countries, lots of them in Africa, with water and sanitation, and as we say, mostly for the low-income community or for the urban poor. And we have several projects undergoing all over the world to improve that basic service, that is water supply and sanitation. So I'm going a little bit back to 2019, when Beira specifically was hit by the first storm, tropical storm. It was something that nobody was expecting. So it had significant damages on the infrastructure and on health. Well, 2 to 3 years after, we had other storms, but the one from 2019 that was called Idai, was extended most to caused the most significant impact because was very intense. The communities and the authorities were not prepared for the impact that the storm had, and they could not lessen the impact and avoid major losses for both material and human side. And at that moment, we realized the infrastructures that we had, either for housing, water supply and sanitation, drainage and power, the basic services, were not resilient enough to handle the storm, or a storm that was of that magnitude. So looking back to 2019, after the storm, for at least 1 week or 15 days after it, the whole Peruvian area of Beira, where the low-income community is settled, was flooded. So water from the rain was not, the authorities were not able to drain the water from the rain. And people had to, for 10 days, more or less, coexist with that amount of water on the neighborhoods. So due to this incapacity of the drainage system, the situation remained for long days, and that brought up the risks brought up health risks, and it showed, it was a proof, a fact that the drainage conditions were very poor. So it rose the need not only for WhatsApp as an NGO that works with water and sanitation, but also for the entire community and the utilities, that we should focus more on sanitation awareness. Although NGOs like WhatsApp, for example, already were working on that area prior to the storm, also rose the need on improving design features of infrastructures of the urban planning and drainage standard focus on resilience, considering also that Beira, I didn't say in the beginning, but Beira is located below the sea level, so it's very prone for flooding. And also we realized that there was need on increasing the amount of drainage infrastructure besides the improvements that were necessary to be done on what already existed. So after the storm, although before WhatsApp was already doing it, WhatsApp realized that we should engage more on working with the communities itself to have better assessment on, or have an assessment firsthand on what was happening on site, to have a realistic view of which were the issues that they had locally and what could be done to solve those problems. So we started working more intensively with what we called community-based organizations. It goes shortly for CBOs. Those community-based organizations, they are organizations that were created by the communities itself, the Peruvian area, and that were very well aware of which are the needs that the community has regarding for any public service, health, water supply, sanitation, drainage, power, everything. They do are aware of the problems that they have, and they in fact have several proposed solutions, local solutions to adjust the general way of solving the problems to what they have locally as conditions to solve them. So we, through the CBOs and by the methodology that WhatsApp has been implementing, we could, after the storm, assess the issues that we created by it, and define, let's say, an action plan to support not only the communities, but also the local authorities to define the next steps to be more prepared in case of any natural disasters. So based on this assessment, together with the authorities, mainly the water and sanitation, we defined campaigns to improve sanitation awareness within the communities. We raised, together with the utilities, the need in improving the water supplying system and the drainage services. And we together drafted some, let's say, local solutions for the problems that we had within those communities. Well, of course, that after all this assessment and immediate plan defined to be implemented, they will raise the need of funding. So through our partners, WhatsApp managed to support financially and technically some CBOs, because they were also, although being a community-based organization, they were also affected by the storm. We support 3 of them. And then on a bigger, I will not say a bigger scale, but on a much larger way, we start our support to the water utility and the sanitation utility. So together with the water utility, WhatsApp have defined and has been using new standards while designing and implementing water network extension projects. With the sanitation utility, we defined and use resilient construction forms on current shared toilets and communal sanitation blocks. Okay, that was a pilot project that we started here, but we already had an idea from the experience that we had on other cities that WhatsApp is working on. And considering climate change, it was brought up by the utilities, the need that they had in equipment that could help them on avoiding bigger impacts in the near future in case of any natural disasters. In addition, for supporting, we supported the authorities to create a more tight relationship with some universities to ensure that in the near future they could have the proper knowledge and technical support to prepare themselves in any case of natural disaster. So after all these supports that we have been doing, we kind of looked into it based on the assessment that we did within the communities, and we together with the local authorities, we came up with several actions that should be implemented alongside with the small activities or projects that we already had defined to ensure more security in case of those in case of any natural disaster that could happen. And it was based on the experience that we had with the previous storms, and several dams, like the need to improve construction standards considering the climate change, mainly for the essential and public utilities. For example, what happened when the Idai storm hit the city was that the network, for example, by the rooting of trees, were completely lifted up. So there was no water reaching any clients because the network was completely damaged. And that we realized was because the implementation or construction standards for the water supplying network that the utility had at that time were not the best. So we made a revision over that, and we started implementing with small projects the changes that we proposed. And now the utility is taking it as an internal procedure, and that is a win, for example, for WhatsApp. We also helped them, or we decided that was a need to develop and put in place response strategies. What happens that when the storm hit the city, nobody knew what to do. The authorities didn't know what to do. So one of the things that we realized that response strategies should be put in place or drafted to be used in the future. Develop and implement policy to support those in need. Low-income communities, once again, those suffered the most with the storm. So one of the things that was discussed and considered while the process of defining response strategies were in place was that when those strategies were defined, low-income communities should be priority always. Improve the access of low-income communities to public service. Support them or support those that don't have financial capacity to have those services. And finally, but the most important, to have a better urban and peri-urban physical planning. What we realize is that the urban planning was out of control of the municipality, so much so that they didn't know where the water supplying authority or the power authority or the sanitation authority should work or should implement their projects, because they were not organized. So that brought up the need from the municipality to define a master plan, not only because they do have master plans, for example, but it's separatedly for water supply and sanitation. But we realized that should be an integrated master plan. Well, in general terms, that is what we have been working on. And well, I hope it was clear, but I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Carmen. Very clear. Just to highlight a few points that you had made from your very informative overview of the situation in Beira after 2019 and the passing of the tropical storm. This idea that even when we work with local communities, it's important to also work with local authorities. So I think even when we do community-based work, it's important to draw that linkage with the local authorities to ensure that we reach a certain level of scale having to do with items that go beyond the community, right? When we talk about the planning of water and sanitation infrastructure, for example, the infrastructure that reaches the local community needs to be planned by the local authorities as well, too. Also putting in place construction standards. These are items which need to be set at the city level at the very least, or the regional level or at a national level, and this inevitably requires the participation of local authorities. So thank you very much for highlighting this. We're going to move into the discussion part of this session. I'm going to provide maybe about a couple of minutes if anybody has specific clarifying questions. If not, we can go immediately into the discussions. There is the chat box on the right. I would encourage participants to include questions there if they would like to, or to offer the questions directly to the group verbally. So I'll open it up to the floor for any clarifying questions. Otherwise, I'm going to move into the moderated discussion with the question to the group as a whole. Okay, 20 seconds. All right, great. So, okay, Kelvin, yes, I see your hand up. Please.
Yeah, that was a good presentation, madam. My name is Kelvin Stara from Zambia.
Kelvin, are you still connected? Okay, seems as
Hello?
though, yes, Kelvin, there was a brief cutout. Could you start from the beginning again?
Yes, I think it was a technical fault. I'm Kelvin from Zambia, representing Technical Center for Climate Change and Agriculture Development. It's a local NGO dealing with climate adaptation related issues. So my concern is, from the previous speaker, she has presented it very so well. Now, my concern is in the Zambian context, we usually have issues to do with political interference. Local municipalities already, they do have the power to plan and effectively implement the projects that they have within their scope. However, due to political interference and the less funding from the government, it's the one that mostly represents challenges and incapacitate the powers of the local municipalities. So how do we handle such kind of situations?
Excellent question, Kelvin. Thank you. Let me first give the opportunity to Patrick and Carmen to offer some insights, but also acknowledging that there are a lot of experts working on on assessing risk in informal settlements within the audience as well. So first, I'll open the floor to Patrick and Carmen to provide a response to Kelvin, but also open it up to the group. And I think it's a great question that was raised, is that yes, of course, we need to work with local authorities if we want to have impact in local communities, but also how do we balance that with sometimes the challenges that are associated with working with local authorities? Please, Patrick or Carmen, would you like to respond to Kelvin's question?
Yeah, I think good question. And I think for us it's a balance that you have to take. But for us, we see it as the benefits outweigh the non-benefits, if I may say that. So for us, we foresee it as a partnership that not saying that we are sleeping now with government and you can't criticize or you can't blame them. I think it's an objective partnership that looks at a particular issue, and when you feel that something that is going wrong, we here in Kenya, and how we work with government, we are able to tell them this is not right, this is what you're doing, this is not right, what is the and push for that. And if that is not possible, then for us, how we do it is we tell the community then, because the government will always listen now, community directly to come and bring an issue that I feel that the government. So as an organization, we try to be objective, but also because most of the work planning is a prerogative of government. So you can't do planning without government. And for you to be able to, because planning is expensive to implement. So for instance, in our case, you cannot be able to fund a plan. The only person who has the ability to that is government. So as a prerogative of government itself to do their work, then here in Kenya, once the government can, same as Carmen has said, you cannot be able to allocate any resources if there's no plan. So then you support them to do their work, support them to be able to develop plans, but also in return, then the community is able to benefit from those plans. So for us is to safeguard, to ensure the government doesn't change the plans, government follows community proposals and all that.
Thank you, Patrick, for the response. Carmen, would you like to offer a response to Kelvin's question? Otherwise, I'll open it up to the floor. If anybody has any experience of...
Yeah,
please.
hello?
Yes, we can hear you now, Carmen.
Okay, thank you. I will agree with Patrick. And yeah, in situations where politics goes or stands on the way of the solutions, is a little bit complicated. But at least here in Beira, and it's same is happening in our capital, in Maputo, because WhatsApp is also working there here in Mozambique, is that we have some kind of understanding with the municipality authorities, with the public services, with the government, that we are all aiming for the same result, that is to provide better services, to have the communities or the population using or living in better conditions. That sometimes require, I must confess, to bring in funding to implement projects or activities. It's not a matter of sitting with the authorities and then after we agreed on a solution or something that will be implemented. Several times, I would say 85 to 90% of the times, we need to come in with the funding to implement the activities, but at least they are not reluctant on implementing it. So it's some kind of agreement that we already have, and we have been able to manage on the best way until now. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. And just to sum up, I mean, I think you know, Patrick was very good at highlighting the need to have to involve the local authorities, but then Carmen, I think you draw attention to what oftentimes are the incentives that keep people involved, which is the funding. You know? Essentially the $1 million question. Does anybody else have experience of not only implementing risk assessments and informal settlements, but also walking this very delicate balance of working with local authorities, understanding that there are many challenges associated with. Is there anybody else that would like to offer some insights from their own experiences? Okay. If not, then I do have a question for the group, particularly as it relates to building local capacity. Could anybody talk a little bit more, at the very least, Patrick and Carmen, but if there are participants in the room that would like to share some insights, could anybody offer some tips or some advice when it comes to building local capacity amongst local communities, as well as the local government in actually implementing climate risk assessments? I think oftentimes, you know, we think that, you know, local capacity building, it could be very easy, but sometimes even generating the interest in wanting to learn how to assess climate risk within their own communities can often be a challenge. Patrick or Carmen, can you offer some insights in terms of what it's like actually building this capacity locally, and if you have any tips for the audience as well?
I start. I can start.
Yes, please.
I think for us is to ensure that the community is involved in every process, and our capacity starts from the data collection, where the community themselves are the ones who collect the data, like the household data. They do the enumeration, they do the profiling. They do the GPS coordinates of every services that is provided in their area. So the community are trained on how to use the GPS. They're trained on how to fill in the questionnaires. They're trained on how to how to map, or to use the mapping sheets, so they're able to map every household in their area. So all that work is done by the community. So they are trained and they have gained expertise. Another thing we have done is we have also, like during this planning process, we created a kind of a program where we took the community through processes where every week they attend a class followed by practicals. So they'll come to class. We'll discuss the issues of how you can mobilize the community, how you can conduct a meeting, how you can do minutes. So then after the class, they go and do it practically. So having a bit of mixing between theory and practical. So then they'll come and report to us what they did, and they're able to share the experiences, the challenges they faced. Then after that, then they'll also ask for areas they feel they need to improve on. Then we'll train them on that. So it becomes theory plus practical, and it continues. So, and we have seen such kind of program changing even people who could not even stand in front of people, who could not even be able to communicate grow and be able to communicate, gain that confidence in working. Then also issues in terms of leadership, where the community themselves are able to articulate their issues properly, teach them on how to present. So when they go to a government office, they're able to articulate their issues properly. They're able to use the data they have collected and analyzed to push for the things they want. So that kind of program is the one that we use and support the community growth. Plus also the best one that we have also used, the last one, is the exchanges, where we have peer-to-peer learning, where one group goes to another group, see what they're doing, and they exchange ideas. That has also been one of the, also a very good tool of empowering community. Thank you.
Carmen, would you like to add to this? Not,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. Basically, what Patrick said is more or less the same as we've been doing. We have, as I said in my presentation, we have two groups that we have been working closely to: the CBOs, or the community-based. We have background on how to approach the communities. So that is a very rich background that helps us on any other kind of training or skills improvements that we need to give them. We have been working a lot with them to implement campaigns on the community, not only related to water supply and sanitation, but with other issues. And in those situations, we have to provide them specific technical training, because the background in terms of how to interact with the community they already have. So they have been benefiting from this training over and over, and they've been capable of multiply that they have and expand to other areas where WhatsApp is not working, because we have to focus on specific neighborhoods. So on other ones that we cannot work on, they have by themselves with their own resources, or sometimes together with other NGOs, implement the same campaigns with the same methodology, with the same content or information in other areas. So that is a plus for us. With the utilities, either water utility or sanitation utility, every time that we bring something new or we have a project implemented, we tend to bring also training for the personnel of the utility. Let's say, for example, when we decided to improve the construction standards for the network, water supply network, we defined the new standards. We had, in fact, a contractor doing the extension or the implementation of the project, but at the same time, we had the contractor and a consultant training the technicians from the utility, from the water utility, on how to implement those new standards, because for them was new. For example, they were used to networks in MPPC as material, and we changed that into HDPE, that is a more resilient material, reduces a lot the amount of leaches, losses, risk of contamination by underground water. Again, beta is below sea level, has a very high water level underground. So we came up with the solution of using HDPE instead of MPVC, and that required training for them to know how to use the new type of material and the equipment to use, because they were used to do the installation manually, and then we introduced new machines. So those are the kind of trainings that we add to our projects, and that means increase in terms of knowledge to the utilities. for example, a non-revenue was kind of in brackets a taboo issue within the water utility. Now they are approaching it more. They got from to get in our project's implementation, they got several trainings on non-revenue, and it's something that we are investing more and more to see if they have non-revenue water has priority to reduce losses, and then therefore have more sustainable service for the communities or for the clients that they have. So those are some of the examples that I have, that we work with the utilities, and we were able to bring more knowledge to them and to the community-based organizations. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Both Patrick and Carmen talking about these challenges and how we can better overcome. One item that I think is sort of the next natural question has to do with the legacy. How do we ensure that the work that's done with communities in assessing climate risk at the community level actually then gets translated into action? This will be an item that will be discussed in the following session with the plenary. But I just want to first thank everybody for joining this call on assessing climate risk in informal settlements. I'd like to send a very special thank you to both Patrick and Carmen for sharing the wealth of experience that they bring from Kenya as well as Mozambique. Yes, let's keep this discussion going in the next call. We talked a lot about the challenges that are encountered, some tips of the trade in terms of how we can overcome them, as well as this balancing act between local communities as well as local authorities. In the next session, we'll be talking about what next, the legacy of these climate risk assessments and how we translate this into action. All right, everyone, thank you very much. We have maybe about a minute and a half before the next session, and so we'll just move there. Thank you. And just to highlight one item from ASA, the water adaptation community. This community works well with the more people that are connected, sharing insights, sharing experiences. And so in the chat box to the right, you will see a link for joining the WAC platform itself. This is the water adaptation community hosted at the Global Center on Adaptation. Let's keep this discussion going via the platform as well. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Discussion, I would have to say. But yeah, thanks again, everyone. And I'll see you all in this, well, we stay in this room and we wait for others to join if they haven't done already. I think they're already joining us.
They're just joining now, so it's perfect timing. So I think are you back here? I think everyone's back, so we can pass back to you, Joop.
Yes, I'm back, and I really hope you enjoyed your breakout session. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to join the English breakout on risk assessment in informal settlements, with really fascinating and very insightful presentations from Mukuru by Patrick and on Mozambique by Carmen. And thanks again, presenters and discussants, for your openness to share your experiences on this very important topic. We move on with a short panel discussion. And first of all, I'd like to invite the moderators of the room to join the panel. So Chris is one of our panelists. Chris brings more than 15 years of experience in resilience building. my apologies. In urban development, infrastructure, and housing sectors. Prior to joining GCA, Chris was a disaster risk management specialist at the World Bank at the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, GFDRR. The second panelist is Anais, and she's an expert in urban development and climate adaptation with 10 years of work experience and a focus on African cities. She has a PhD from the Technical University of Darmstadt and has published on topics related to informal settlements, public participation in the provision of urban services, and social justice in relation to the informal economy. And Anais works for SWECO and has joined the Rapid Climate Risk Assessment in Antananarivo, Mozambique in 2022. And last but not least, our third panelist is Leon, a hydrologist by training. He's a senior climate resilience specialist leading the implementation of programs for the Resilient Cities Network, RCN. And he has a very strong interest in nature-based solutions as a vehicle for adapting to climate change while delivering social environmental co-benefits to community. He has experience in research and consulting and has worked amongst others for the World Bank and has developed a climate risk assessment for various African cities. Thank you for moderating the panel discussions. I'd like to start you with, to ask you with a very short summary, a minute, of the key highlights of your session. Chris, over to you.
It seems we've lost Chris momentarily, so we will add him to the spotlight as he must have dropped off as soon as he rejoins. So maybe we can start with someone else.
Yeah, sure. Leon.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, you are
Say-
here. You're here now? Okay.
Yeah.
Chris.
No worries. Thank you. Yes, so just to give a quick summary of our session, we had presentations from Patrick Ngore, as well as Carmen Singh Seng. Patrick is working in Nairobi, specifically in the community of Mukuru, and Carmen is working in Beira, Mozambique. We had some very interesting insights shared, particularly from working with local communities, beyond just the identifying what the challenges are and what the risks are. Patrick shared some really interesting insights as it relates to the structure of engaging communities, that it's not a simple matter of just showing up and asking the communities what they want, but also in creating sort of a hierarchy of decision-making within the local communities itself. So working from the individual households and asking households to nominate representatives, and then from representatives, then clustering participants into a decision-making structure. There was a lot of discussion that was raised as it relates to pursuing a multidisciplinary approach, both in Mukuru as well as in Beira, and highlighting that this essentially takes time. I think oftentimes when we talk about working in informal communities, we want to focus on the local community itself, but also highlighting the importance of working with local authorities. And this came through very clearly in Carmen's presentation, particularly as it relates to the passing of a tropical storm in 2019. So the emergency response required coordination on the part of local authorities. And so engaging local government is important. One of the things that, or a few of the things that Carmen had highlighted where having local government participation is absolutely critical is in things such as setting construction standards for infrastructure that goes beyond just the local community, which is basically anything related to water and sanitation, but also in the coordination of the local response. A key item that she found to be a determining factor is establishing with local authorities the common challenges that we're all sort of working to try to solve, which oftentimes is improving living conditions or improving service delivery, but also bringing some funding. And oftentimes that may require outside funding to come in to incentivize people to sit around the table. Just very quickly, as it relates to the discussion. There was a question of how to deal with local interference of local authorities, or overcoming this perception of local interference by local authorities. And I think both Patrick and Carmen had some really interesting insights in terms of getting people around the table, agreeing to common goals, but also establishing the fact that when it comes to planning, we need to involve local government inevitably. Lastly, as it relates to building local confidence, both Patrick and Carmen had some, building local capacity in climate risk assessment. Both Patrick and Carmen had some interesting insights. But I think at the very base level of it is building this level of confidence amongst local communities to actually work with local government, giving them the tools, sometimes on the softer side, not just the technical side of participating in meetings, offering comments, working with local governments to basically help move these risk assessments forward. Okay, so that's a quick summary of what was discussed in our session.
Thank you so much, Chris. Moving to Anais, could you give us a very short summary, let's say the 3 key insights from your breakout session?
Si ça vous dérange pas, je vais répondre en français parce que notre session aussi est en français. Et si je ne me trompe pas, il y a un traducteur pour tous ceux qui ne comprennent pas le français. So I'm just saying, if it doesn't disturb everyone, I'll just summarize the key points in French. Donc, on a eu 2 orateurs dans notre session.
Speakers during our session. The first one was Miss Sarah Marquez Martin, who works in Maputo, Agriculture Without Borders, and another speaker who works in Antananarivo, Mr. Lucky. And those were very complementary presentations. Sarah spoke about the scale. How can we work in informal neighborhoods? What can we do in the streets, in small? She spoke of it, she said it was like acupuncture. How can we plant plantain trees, for example, in order to really structure those plots of land and to define specific borders between those plots, between those lands. She spoke also about involving the people who live in those communities, to have informal discussions with them. And many times they don't have the time to participate in a formal way, in a structured way. And it's much easier to speak with them by going where they are working, and by discussing in an informal way with them. Also, the other presentation from Antananarivo, he spoke about the city. What can we do at the scale of the city? The sanitation plan of the city. Great infrastructure works that can be completed on a larger scale, and how we can organize and plan that for the future. And so the 3 key takeaways are we must avoid building in risk areas, climate risk areas. Second of all, we need to improve the situation, the living conditions in certain neighborhoods, and we need to promote better conditions so that people can live and work in these areas and so forth. And the last important point that we spoke about was the issue of immigration. Many people are leaving rural areas because of flooding, because of dry seasons, and they're coming to cities. And so the cities have to manage that issue. And many times, if they don't organize things in a structured way, those people go and live in slums where living conditions
où ils vont plus être impactés.
are difficult and where they'll be more impacted. I hope that I was able to summarize the main takeaways from this discussion. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Anais. I mean, it seems you had a fascinating discussion as well. Last but not least, Leon, can you quickly summarize 3 key takeaways from your session? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, you. Thanks to the other moderators. I think we've had an overlap on cities and case studies. So we had Antananarivo and Maputo. Basically, what we found is important and critical to understand is that we have hurricanes that become more extreme, but at the same time, we might have more prolonged dry periods. So there are issues of times of too much water or too little water. Then we also discussed the nexus with health. So there are increased respiratory issues, diarrhea issues, generally the new climate conditions that the cities are facing, that, well, Antananarivo is facing, is leading to more hospitalizations. The hospitals, though, are suffering themselves from climate change and how to deal with impacts. There was also a mention on the food, well, agriculture climate nexus. There is significant damage on crops. And there was a clear mention that there is a weak governance. So there is no clear coordination between the cities and the national government. That's what I'll say for the first case presented, as well as maybe I should also mention that they feel there is low capacity and low resources to actually legislate, implement, regulate, and then monitor what they're doing. And then for the informal settlement in Maputo, in that case, I think it's very similar to Anais. What you presented is they're working on street redesign, creating better households. So how you build back better, how you provide some sort of land tenure and create construction and design and construction new guidelines. So cities can become slowly future climate proof. So this is what I would summarize, but what I found extremely interesting is that the entry point is not climate change adaptation necessarily. It is understanding the communities and dealing with risks that they feel are their priority. So if it's crime, you need to understand how you can reduce crime and so on and so forth.
Well, thank you so much, Leo. I mean, there seems to be quite a bit of overlap in the 3 breakout rooms. I want to actually pose 3 questions, and I want each one of you to take out the one that you think your session provided the clearest and most compelling inputs on. So the first question is, how do we move from a risk assessment to actually action on the ground? I mean, when you talk to a mayor, they say like, no more reports, we need money, we need action on the ground. And unless you can provide that, please stay away. That's the first question. The second question is, how do we use this process of assessing climate risk to build local capacity within the communities and within the local administration? And the third question, very related, so how do we use an RCRA to actually build bridges between decision makers and the public? So 3 questions: how do we move on beyond an RCRA and get to work on the ground? How do we build capacity while assessing risk? And how do we build a bridge between decision makers and the public? And as I mentioned, like, I would like to ask each one of you to pick out that question you feel that was the one that you like most coming from the breakout session that you were in. Anyone who puts your hand first, please go ahead. Okay, nice. There you go. Ladies first.
I'm going to choose the first question to answer, and that's the one about how do we go from the assessment to action on the ground. So one of our presenters, Sarah Marquez Martin, was presenting the case study that they had in Maputo. And there, I think it really shows very much this hands-on sort of solution. And there it is also in this context of quite limited funding that they have, and where they, on the one hand, really went and activated the community, the local community, to first of all understand what their challenges was, but also to have ownership of the process and the transformation that was happening. So people were being trained, people were actually doing the works themselves. She was giving a story of this woman who was like really carrying the cement to put it down, and she was also explaining that just this process, the fact that they were involved and that they were part of the transformation, also changed and had an impact on lots of other things, such as gender, equality, such as because through the people's involvement in the project, that certain relations changed, and that also it was also a project that was very much supported by the municipality. So you had the political involvement, but you really had the local population hands-on doing things. And the solutions that were implemented were very simple, low-cost solutions for the biggest part. It was about planting banana trees. It was about digging a hole and filling it with rocks to have like drainage. It was about making sure that the surface was earth rather than cement, so that the water could drain through it. It was all a lot of very small, low cost, but effective solutions that they managed to implement with the local community. And so I think that is a beautiful example of what comes next. And when people are like, enough assessments, we want to see a difference. I think that's also a case study that really illustrates that there is, and you can really see a difference, even though you're just having these sort of very small scale micro implementations.
Thank you, Sma. I mean, to me, it seems you started answering one of the questions, but actually you touched upon all three. I see that Chris has his hand up. So Chris, over to you.
Yes, and I guess maybe in response to all three questions, maybe one or two general responses that were highlighted by both Patrick and Carmen. I mean, what I found to be very interesting from both Patrick and Carmen's presentations is this idea of almost curating a discussion with the local authorities. And I think oftentimes when we go into local communities that we want to get really quickly into the mapping and the assessment, the technical aspects, but the softer side of drawing these connections with the local authorities, creating this communication channel between the two, I think is something that not only enables a more efficient process, but helps ensure that the long-term uptake of the results of the assessment actually are integrated into the planning as well as the programming that's implemented by the government. And again, just to highlight this aspect of the structure in which communication as well as decision making is made within the local community is something very interesting from the Mukuru example. And from the beta example, this idea of actually spending time and investing time with the local authorities to set the common objectives, right? So I think that, in a lot of these community-based works, there is an issue of, how is it that we deal with the local government? And sometimes there's a lack of trust on the part of informal settlements to work with the local government, but actually investing time in getting to the common objectives, I think also is really important, so that if ever there is a disagreement or misunderstanding or potentially even a conflict, we could always go back to these common objectives that both the local communities as well as the local municipality authorities have agreed to, which oftentimes is, increasing service delivery within communities, improving service delivery, as well as improving the living conditions at the local community. So sometimes reiterating these very basic goals can often be good sort of ways to bring people together, even in times of disagreement.
Thank you so much, Chris. Leon, that leaves only you for the one of the three questions, but I guess you're going to touch upon all three as well.
No, it's actually none of them, probably, but it's a comment on the third one. How do we build bridge between technical rapid CRAs and decision makers and the public? There was a discussion in our room around the precision, accuracy of these assessments. There was a bit of a debate between two technical experts, and the suggestion was that yes, we need to make sure that this, what we're showing, is accurate, it's precise, it can be used, or at least to know the limitations, making sure what are the, to what extent these results are, I'll use the word valid, but probably usable, let's say usable. And one comment was that we can start with those, and then when we need more detailed assessments, given that we're talking about an urban environment which requires high resolution analysis, but you don't have the funding or the time to do this everywhere, you can just find the hotspots with the rapid CRAs and then work in more detail there. That can be useful later for decision makers. Now, as far as the public is concerned, from my experience in my organization, they always tell me, you're too technical. Can you make this message more so that it appeals to the public? So we need to create nicer stories. Storytelling might be the right way to do this. Understand the communities to whom we're talking and what we're asking from them. So we need to have a very clear idea on how we do this. I'm a technical person. I don't think I'm the right person to do this, because I'm used to talking to other technical people. So if you want to talk to the public, you need some sort of middle person who can translate these technical knowledge.
Thank you. I have two more questions, and I'm not going to ask each of you to answer both, because that wouldn't leave any time for other people in this really fascinating knowledge exchange. The first question I'm going to ask two of you to answer. Like, working on climate adaptation requires often to take a kind of midterm view perspective. Let's say what's going to happen 5 years from now. How do we get informal communities who are facing so many day-to-day issues to think beyond the day of tomorrow? I mean, like, they might not have water, they might not have a secure income, they might not have security of tenure. Some people may not have a square meal that's assured for tomorrow. How do we kind of then take a midterm perspective that's so much needed to work on climate adaptation? The first two of you who want to answer that question. Nice, your hand is up.
I'm fast. Yes, I think that's a super important question, but I also, in my experience, at least in the case of Antananarivo in Madagascar, what we saw while we were doing the rapid climate risk assessment is that climate adaptation isn't an issue of 5 years from now. People are there's already floodings happening, there's already drought happening, there's already people that are leaving the rural areas inside the country because they aren't able to keep living the way they were living. And also cyclones. I mean, these are things that are already happening. It's already a present. And so, yeah, I think also a lot of these communities, for example, in the case of Madagascar, every year they have to leave their homes because every year it floods. This is the present. These are problems now.
Thank you very much. Chris, your hand is up as well. Over to you.
Yeah, I actually have a very similar response to Anais, but I think the idea is that essentially after after a disaster strikes, usually that's front and center in everyone's mind. And similar to what Anais had said, that it doesn't necessarily require the occurrence of a disaster for something to still be a nuisance. So, we may hear in the headlines that, this community was flooded and however many people were displaced, but that's usually an indication that there's issues of drainage within the community, that maybe it's not large scale flooding, but it's still enough flooding for it to get into the house and to get one's clothes wet, or to destroy one's furniture, or to create disease within the community. So I think the idea is that oftentimes it's having a discussion with community members and just sort of asking flat out, what is the common problem that you encounter. And obviously there's going to be a laundry list of issues, whether it's food, hunger, schooling, and all that stuff, etc. But I think being able to offer the knowledge that we bring, as people who work in climate change, and seeing if that is something of importance and of priority of the community, I think is of use. And basically just saying that, what we can help you in is in the area of adapting to climate change. What can we do to help make your community more resilient? And there oftentimes is a very wide-ranging list of actions that can be taken, not just improving the drainage canal, but it could even be making the school more resilient to flood, right? So I think within climate change adaptation, it's a wide enough spectrum of activities that we can offer that usually can fit into the development priorities of the community, whatever it may be.
Thank you so much, Chris. I mean, my last final question, and then I'm going to hand over to whoever is in the room. There's a fine balance. Clearly engaging communities in joint or participatory assessment of their needs and issues is something that takes time and effort and resources. I mean, that's what Patrick was describing, for instance, in Mukuru. It's a process of months, maybe even years, to build up the capacity, to build up the trust, to have this conversation that's so badly needed. At the same time, climate is here and now. We have limited resources, and there's a need to do something, a very dipstick assessment of what are the key issues. So how do we strike a fine balance? And Leon, you already touched upon this. I'm going to invite you to give a first response, and then ask either Anais or Chris to add to that. Leon, over to you.
What can you repeat the question exactly?
So it's how do we strike the balance between the need to really engage communities in a conversation, build their capacity, build trust, and at the same time be very fast. So where do we strike the balance? Because this was about rapid climate risk assessments. The process in Mukuru, for instance, is something that takes months or maybe even years.
Well, to start with, I think you need the expertise. Like you said, you need the technical people, but you need the engagement experts. For project design, I'd say it's extremely important that we recognize that participation requires time and expertise. Engagement requires these two components. Probably it might require a bit of redesign of the project compared to how we originally thought it would go, because we identified different priorities than what we had in mind. And of course, this requires significant financing. That's how you speed things up. I think there is no other magic touch here. Of course, you can have significant financing and still do the wrong thing, but it's a necessary condition. We cannot hear you.
Sorry, yes, I was muted. So either Chris or Anais, you want to add something to the answer that Leon gave? Chris is handled.
Yeah, I think maybe one example I can highlight is the work that we're doing in Liberia. Though it's just at the beginnings, one thing that we've learned from working with the local community, but also in a manner that's very rapid, is working with the local partner who already has experience doing enumeration in these local communities. And that pretty much in any country you go to, there's going to be a local NGO, or a university that probably has already engaged its communities in identifying development priorities. Maybe it wasn't necessarily directly related to climate change adaptation, but they have these existing relationships with local communities that can really be built upon when doing a rapid climate risk assessment. I think the other thing that's really important too is that oftentimes this local organization that's been doing a lot of enumeration in local communities, it usually has been very well trained in managing expectations of the local communities as well. So in Liberia, for example, the folks that we've been working with, because they are specialized in enumeration, they've also been very good about conveying to the local community that just because we're coming in and identifying what the needs are doesn't necessarily mean that tomorrow we're going to come with all the solutions and financing. So managing those expectations, I think, is really important. And oftentimes that's built off of an organization that the local community already trusts.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, I see there are some questions coming out in the chat box. Is there anyone in the audience who likes to ask a question? And I'm just going to ask you, keep the question short. This is not an opportunity to share your experience. This is really an opportunity to ask a question to one of the moderators or anyone else in the knowledge exchange. Okay, I have a question then from Edgar Cruz from UNEP. Which role can the private sector play and how can it be part of the solutions for resilience in cities? And could anyone give an example from their experience how the private sector has added and contributed to resilience building in cities? Carmen.
I can, go ahead.
Carmen, please, over to you.
Thank you. It's private sector, how they can help. There are so many things that they can do. Private sector means that they're also working on a specific area. They do something within the community or within the society. So on those things that you are doing on the city, you can I don't know, together with the local authority or with the government, look into it and see how we can adjust it and to be more resilient to climate change. You can also have other approach. For example, WhatsApp has been working with several funders, and almost all of them, if not all of them, are from the private sector. Okay, they found in WhatsApp a partner that knows how to work with the communities here in Mozambique or in any other country that WhatsApp is working on, and together with us, we define, okay, we want to work to improve this. If you go and say to any NGO that is working on a specific area, either water supplying or sanitation, and you say, okay, I want to work, but I want to focus on climate change. I want to focus on resilience for climate change. For sure, any NGO that is working in a community can have an approach over this. So there are, for me, these are the immediate ways that the private sector can support the issue. But for sure, if we see it and we brainstorm, we will come up with several other ones. Thank you.
Thank you. I myself like to add a perspective, and then I'll hand over to Nick. I mean, the question is, how can we not involve the private sector? Typically in a city, 60 to 70% of the properties are privately owned. If we want to build resilience in a city, all of these private properties, whether it's a factory, whether it's a house, somehow have the potential and the need to contribute to resilience building. Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Hugh. It's a very specific example that I've seen in Cape Town and I think Nairobi as well, and it's specific to water. In this case, it's a situation where to sustain the water supply to the city. Various sort of nature-based solutions, if you like, had to be sustained in the upper catchments. In the case of Cape Town, it was to remove alien invasive vegetation around dams. These are guzzlers of water, and this was the cheapest option. And what they did then was that companies that are also users of that water from the utility side put up a fund to kickstart how to sustain those nature-based solutions. In the end, the full financing required for that was not something that the companies themselves on their own could sustain. But at least the lesson I think that comes out of that was that their fungible finance allowed them to be creative at the start to kickstart this water fund for these solutions. This has been done, I think, in Nairobi, Upper Tana Water Fund, and I think there are a few others in Latin America, etc. So just one example. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Nick. We got one more question. That's also the last one because we're moving towards the end of this knowledge exchange. This is from Ivan from ACOM. Basically, we talked a lot about involving local communities, but what about local decision makers? Like a mayor, super busy, never has time, can spare you maximum half an hour and will never ever read anything longer than half a page. Who from the panelists has experience in engaging with local decision makers, and how did that work out? Chris, your hand is up. Over to you.
Thanks, Joop. I think a good example that we can share is the work that we're doing in Accra, Ghana, which basically started off with the climate risk assessment as well as an institutional mapping, and this has then gone into a prioritization of investment. So the idea is that early on with the climate risk assessment, we brought the mayoral authorities on board early on. This is the Accra Metropolitan Assembly as well as the Accra Mayor's Office. Maybe not necessarily out in the field with this collecting information, but at the very least presenting the results of the climate risk assessment, as well as collectively coming to some very broad stroke conclusions in terms of what needs to be done next, in terms of what the priorities are, what the challenges are that need to be addressed. What's been nice is that GCA continued this dialogue with the mayor's office and continued on to a prioritization of investments and doing a gap analysis based off of a gap analysis that was also done by GCA. What this essentially entailed was following up with local, regional, as well as national authorities, understanding what they found to be priorities in their portfolio of what needs to be done to address climate change. And then going back to the mayor's office and working very closely with the mayor's office in identifying what these prioritized investments should be. This involved packaging these priorities into actual projects and then putting a very rough dollar figure towards what the investment amount would be. You know, whether or not this has resulted in immediate action, not yet, but at the very least, it's gotten the mayor very much involved and supportive of this idea of securing investment for climate adaptation at the Accra city level.
Thank you so much, Chris. Anais, over to you. Your hand is up.
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to give one more example. In the C40 methodology for rapid climate risk assessments, there they really highlight the importance of having the political engagement as a sort of prerequisite to start the rapid climate risk assessment. So it's really about, it has to be sort of demand driven, that the city says like, we need this rapid climate risk assessment. We are going to make an official communication that like we are formally like standing behind this, that we are part of this. So I think that's also something important to really have this sort of formalized consent and them really engaging and taking ownership also partly of the process. And secondly, I agree also with what Chris was saying, is the importance not per se of working with the mayor himself, but with the mayor's office, and to have them participate in at least things like prioritizing things so that you do all the work, you do all the homework, and you quickly bring it together, and you just ask them to sort of help you rank, or or if there's certain important things that are missing, etc. So to really make those moments where you do interact with them as efficient as possible for yourself.
Leon, the very last answer and the last word is over to you. Keep it short because we're almost at the end of the session.
Yeah, sure. Something I'll give you I'll share the experience from our network members, the Resilient Cities network members. We have the Chief Resilience Officer, who's in all cities that are members of our network, and they play this role of connecting the priorities for building resilience with a political, let's say, part of the administration and the more management part of the administration. So they play a role in raising the point of climate change in the agenda, and has worked quite well. In other cases, it's quite institutionalized, climate change adaptation. It's not just sitting in one department, there are working groups. And that's something that the authority, the mayor, cannot work against it. It's sometimes it's even stronger than the mayor.
Thank you so much, Leon. This brings us to the end. Before I start thanking people, I like to draw your attention to the WhatsApp group that's being set up to continue discussions, but also the opportunity to join the water adaptation community. It's an open platform with a specific purpose of connecting people in working in different places, people with different roles, people also, let's say, working on implementation, on policy, international policy. It's an open space. Please join. We would welcome you there very much. And thanks first of all, to Leon, Anais, and Chris for your willingness and openness to facilitate and moderate these sessions, also for being part of the panel. Thanks a lot for all the presenters, because it's great to hear the stories from the field. It's great to hear your experiences in this really important area. I also like to thank some people in the background, Åse and Olivia and Celine. There's a lot of hard work that goes into organizing these sessions. It's not always visible, but thanks a lot for all the hard work to the three of you, because you are basically the ones who've been carrying all the sessions. Thanks. That kind of brings me to the end. Olivia, over to you for the final closure.
Yes, thank you, Joep. So I've just pasted the link to the water adaptation community that you mentioned. So if you sign up there, you will hear more from me in the future. We have monthly informal meetings. We have webinars and events like these. So, and in that online portal, you can post case studies and articles and resources to share among the community. So we'd love to see you there. One final thing I will share in the chat box is a very short survey. It will only take you 2 or 3 minutes to complete, to just tell us about how you enjoyed this event and to help us build these events in the future. So again, thank you everyone, and hope to see you joining the water adaptation community and joining us again in events in the future. And with that, we're gonna close out and release everyone from the meeting.
Thank you. Bye.
You all.
Thank you.
Goodbye.